Hi, my name is Jonathan Mayer. I make liturgical art under the pseudonym Scapegoat Studio, but I'm also privileged to be a stained glass designer for Willet Hauser Architectural Glass, the largest and oldest stained glass studio in North America. And I've been asked to explain the process of making a stained glass window, so that's what we're going to do today. The basic art of making stained glass hasn't fundamentally changed in the 800 years or so that it's been used in churches. It's still made of pieces of colored glass that are cut to size, painted, fired in a kiln, and held together with lead cames and support bars. What has changed is the development of style and technique, and the way that technology can get us from one step to the next. The process begins when our specialized field crew go to the church and take accurate measurements of the openings. That allows us to create a scaled artist layout, and a scaled artist layout eliminates the guesswork in the design. It allows us to design into the actual shape of the opening and know that in the end it will fit in the window that it's meant to fit into. This project had a Pentecost scene that involved multiple figures, and because of the complexity I decided to design it at a very small scale at first and do thumbnail sketches to work out the composition. Then I took that sketch, scanned it, and enlarged it to 200% in order to draw into it with more detail. We always design in black and white first, and that allows the client to see the design and to make possible changes before we go into color, and thereby avoiding a lot more labor that would be involved in it. Notice even at this early stage though, we're thinking about it as a stained glass window. So we're thinking about piece sizes and cut lines and where the support bars are going to go and how to avoid having bars that go through a figure's face, for instance. When the black and white designs are approved by the client, then we get to move into color. And once again, very often we go the traditional route of using watercolor and colored pencil and ink, and that's a technique that has been used to create stained glass designs for at least 100 years, and it gives it a very handmade traditional look in an age when so many things are done by computer. And that's not to say that we don't use technology. For instance, it's nice when you're designing a whole series of windows that you only have to paint the border once. And then you can scan it and composite it with the others in the series without having to paint it over and over and over. When the color designs are finalized and approved by the client, then we make color prints to scale, typically 1 inch to 1 foot, and then mount them to mat board. The mounted copy will travel with the job through the studio to ensure that every step of the process remains faithful to the approved version. The next step is glass selection. Every color in the design has to be interpreted into glass. We use antique mouth-blown glass from Germany or France, which gives us hundreds and hundreds of colors and effects to choose from. The glass that is selected will either be drawn from our inventory or ordered from Europe. When an approved stained glass design goes into production, it needs what is called a cartoon. In the glass industry, the cartoon is a full-sized drawing that serves as a guide for the painter. On a light table, the pieces of glass will be laid onto the cartoon, and the design can be traced directly. A cartoon is necessary because a design that looks detailed in a small rendering always needs more work at full size. More detail, more attention to proportion, more clarity in the cut lines, and so on. The designs are scaled up to full size using a large format printer. The design is ghosted onto the paper at 10 or 20% opacity to serve as a guide for the cartoonist. Usually cartooning is done at full size, but sometimes the windows are so large that it necessitates drawing at half or 2/3 size. For instance, this window was done at 66% and then blown up to full size on the printer. That saves a lot of time and labor. Speaking of saving labor, oftentimes stained glass windows will have decorative borders that repeat dozens of times across a series of windows. So instead of painting them each by hand individually, we can make silk screens to print multiples in minutes instead of hours. It's the exact same process used to print on t-shirts. Designing those screens or stencils is also part of the cartooning process. Either by hand or on a computer, each piece of glass has to be designed in a way that makes it reproducible. After the cartoon is finished, it is photographed, squared up, and brought into a CAD program. The program allows us to map out the cut lines with a high degree of precision and create individual pieces of glass. This step is called patterning. Glass color codes can then be assigned to the pieces. The program also numbers the pieces so they can be reassembled easily. The best part about using a CAD program to make the pattern is that the vector-based output can be read by a plotter. We assemble all the pattern information into Adobe Illustrator and then export it to the plotter. The plotter creates a glazing copy of the pattern, which will be used to lead up all the pieces after they are painted. And of course, the numbered pieces will correspond to the numbers in the pattern. In addition to the glazing copy, we also make a glass copy. By applying an adhesive backing to the paper and switching the pen tool for a cutting blade, the plotter can then cut glass patterns. Each numbered pattern piece also has a color code on it. The pieces can be removed from the backing and organized by color. The glass cutter will then trace the pattern templates onto the glass and cut them by hand. This reduces human error and produces very accurate results. When all the glass has been cut, each window is reassembled on light tables for painting. Glass paint is made of powdered glass and metallic oxides held loosely together with a binder. The shading is added by applying a thin wash of paint to the whole piece, allowing it to dry, which it does very quickly, and then carefully removing the powdered pigment with a brush. The painted pieces are carefully loaded into a kiln and fired to over 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point the paint permanently fuses to the glass. The process is repeated sometimes 5 or 6 times to build up layers of shading. Colored enamels can also be added selectively as a final step, but they are fired at a lower temperature. After the painting is completed, the windows head to the glazing tables to be leaded up. Just like a puzzle, the glass is assembled together with strips of lead of varying sizes. When the window is fully assembled, all the joints will be soldered together on both sides of the window. The final step is that a cementing compound is rubbed into the cracks to make the window more rigid, and steel reinforcement bars are soldered at intervals to guard against bowing and sagging over the decades. After that, the windows are labeled and carefully packed into wooden crates, which will take them to the church where they will finally be installed. Even with technology that saves time and labor, making a stained glass window involves hundreds of man hours. From start to finish, we'll often have a project in the studio for a year, but the end result is always rewarding. So there you have it. In a nutshell, that's how Willet Hauser makes a stained glass window.